Hi and welcome to today's class. It is the 21st of April and it's class number 78. So we're starting into a new chapter today and we're going to start looking at algebra fractions. So we're going to use what we have already learned about factorization to help us to simplify fractions. So some of our keywords: numerator, so that's the top of the fraction; denominator is the bottom of the fraction. To simplify, so to make it as simple as possible, we're going to use our factors, and in particular we're going to be focusing on common factors, so a factor that is common. So just to start, I'd love if you just pause the video here, work through these 12 questions and just try and simplify each of those fractions. So I hope that you have had a chance to work through them, and I've just put up the answers here. So hopefully you had no big issues with doing that. If there is any part of that that you're not sure about, feel free to message me and I'll happily work through it with you. But what I'd like to actually focus in on is how does simplifying actually work? So this is something you might do kind of nearly automatically. So I want to break this down into a way that hopefully will make sense as we move into the algebra piece. So let's take 9 over 36. What we actually do, pretty much in our head, is to break it into factors. So I'm going to break this into a 9 and 1. And the reason I'm going to break it into a 9 and 1 is because there's also a 9 on the bottom line. So 9 by 4. So now what we have is a common factor above and below. We think of these as cancelling. Now, I'm not a big fan of the word cancelling because I think then students try and cancel everywhere. But really what's happening is we have a 9 divided by 9, and when we divide any number by itself, we get a 1. And we don't have to write the 1. There's no need, because the 1 multiplying by what's left is not going to change anything. So we're simply left with a quarter. What we think about when we start these back in primary school is what number divides into the top and the bottom. That is a factor. That's what we're thinking about. So here we have 8, which can be 2 by 4, and 14, which can be 7 by 2. Again, we have a common factor in the top and the bottom. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and that leaves us with the fraction 4 over 7. And I think a lot of you are probably doing that in your head without thinking too much about it. But I really want us to understand that process, because if you can understand the process with numbers, you'll be able to understand the process with algebra. So then we have 12 and 20. So we can simplify using the factors 4 and 3 on the top and 5 and 4 on the bottom. 4 is a common factor. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and that leaves us with 3 over 5. So it's really about taking the top, the numerator, and the denominator and breaking it into its factors. We are then able to see, is there any common factors above and below the line, and if there are, they cancel, or rather they will divide to give us a 1, and 1 is a lovely number because we don't have to write it. So let's take an example that is an algebra fraction and see if we can use this logic to help us. So the first one is actually quite straightforward. We have 3b and we want to divide it by 12. So if we think 3b is as factorized as it can be, it's 3 by b. You can put in your brackets if you want. We can do 3 times b, but we know that 3b means 3 multiplied by b. 12 can be split into 4 by 3, so that's its factors. We have a common factor of 3 above and below the line, and that simplifies to b over 4. So that's very similar to what we were doing. Yes, there's a b there, but it's not really getting involved, it's not really doing anything. So let's take a look here. What if we have a more complex algebra fraction? I have 4x plus 8 all over 16x. This is not as straightforward, so we're going to have to figure out how we can factorize the top line. So to help us, I've given us our 4 types of factorization. We have highest common factor, grouping, quadratic trinomial, and difference of two squares. These techniques are only used when we have 2 or more terms. So the bottom line, that's very simple to factorize. We're just going to break it into factors. But the top line, we're going to need one of those 4 types of factorization. So the one that's valid is the first one, highest common factor. So if 4 is common, and that leaves us with an x plus 2. So I'm going to see, can I split the bottom line into something times 4? So it's 4 times 4x. So I've split that, because 16 can be written as 4 times 4. I now have a 4 on the bottom and on the top, so that divides and gives us 1, and we're left with x plus 2 all over 4x. And that's as simple as it can be. And that's just really need to be clear about that. It cannot go any simpler. Sometimes students go, can I not cancel those 2 x's? And that's one of the reasons I hate that word cancelling. Cancelling really is division. And division can only happen when there's multiplication. So do you see up here, we had a 4 by a bracket and the bottom line was 4 by something else. So that division, or cancelling if you want, can only occur when we have multiplication. So when we have those brackets. Because I have no brackets, I have only got a plus in my final answer here. I cannot do any more division or cancelling. So now we have 6n plus 15 all over 9m minus 12. So both of these need some factorization, and lucky for us, they both need highest common factor. So the top line, 3 is common, leaving us with 2n plus 5. On the bottom line, we have 3 is common as well, and we're left with 3m minus 4. Minus 4. And now we have a 3 above and below the line. It is a common factor, and we're left with 2n plus 5 all over 3m minus 4. And again, that is as simple as it can be. We can do no further simplifying, no further cancelling, no further division, because we no longer have factors. We can only do that division or cancelling when we have it broken into factors. These 2 pieces on the numerator and denominator cannot be factorized anymore. So now let's look at an even more complicated version. So that top line definitely needs a bit of factorization. The bottom line, let's see what we need to do with the number. So we're going to use highest common factor. If it helps, we can write this as 6xxy plus 18xy. So what is common? So if we do highest common factor is 6 and an x and a y. That's everything that's common. That leaves you with an x, or a 1x if you prefer, plus 18 divided by 6 is 3, and there's nothing left with that. That's all over 12xy. Now, 21. Getting mixed up. 21xy. Now, the x and y will cancel, but there is no 6 on that bottom line. So what we're going to do with the top line is we're actually going to split this into, we're going to do 3 times 2. I'm going to do times x times y. You don't have to use the brackets if you don't want to. And then we have an x plus 3. So you can use your brackets if you want. You don't need to. And then on the bottom line, we're going to split that into 3 by 7 by x by y. So we have a 3 in common here, an x in common, and a y in common. All of them can cancel because they're all multiplied. That leaves us with 2 times x plus 3 all over 7. Now, it wouldn't be good practice to leave it in factored form, so with the brackets. So to finish this, we would generally multiply out that top line again. So 2x plus 6 all over 7. But that is as simple as it can be. So now we have quite a complicated example here, because if you look on the bottom line we have highest common factor, but on the top line we actually have a quadratic trinomial. Now, I did say that it would be a good idea to make sure you have your shortcut for these, because it'll make it much easier. I do not personally like working with fractions for a long time, so what I tend to do when these questions get a little bit more challenging, I label the top line and the bottom line, and I work with each of them separately. So I take my top line, which is a quadratic trinomial, so it's complicated enough as is, and I'm going to work with it here. So I'm going to use my guide number. My guide number is plus 10. Plus means they're going to have the same signs, and it's going to be 5 and 2. If you're using the shortcut here, brilliant, much quicker, but I'm going to do our full guide number. 5x plus 2x plus 10. I have an x is common, leaving me with x plus 5. Plus 2 is common, again leaving me with an x plus 5. And that gives me x plus 5 times x plus 2. That's my new top line. I'm then going to go and do the bottom line. Now, I don't really need to do the bottom line out here, but since I've already pulled out the top line, I might as well. This is highest common factor. I pull out my 3 and I'm left with x plus 5. So now I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to replace the top line with the 2 factors I've worked out. And I'm going to replace the bottom line with 3 times x plus 5. And what you will see is now there's actually 2 brackets that are the same. So there's a bracket above and below the line. So I can cancel the whole bracket. You can't cancel parts of the bracket. It's not possible. It must be the whole factor. Remember, the bracket is multiplication. So what's in that bracket is the factor. And that will leave us with x plus 2 all over 3, and that's as simple as it can be. So the same logic, but now we're just doing a lot more work because we have something like a quadratic trinomial. So example 6, this time we again have a quadratic trinomial, but it's on the bottom. But I'm still going to do my labeling. TL for top line, BL for bottom line. That allows anybody who's correcting my work, or just for yourself, to keep track. 4x minus 20. Okay, so there's our list. It's going to be highest common factor. 4 is common. That leaves us with x minus 5. My bottom line, that's a quadratic trinomial. So this time I'm going to use the shortcut. So plus 40. So my guide number, remember I'm allowed to use my shortcut because it's just an x squared. That's all that's there. So I have a plus 40 and I want to get minus 13. So my signs are going to be minus. So we're going to have, you can work them all out, 5 and 8. So minus 5 minus 8, which is minus 13. So in my bracket, that is minus 5 and a bracket minus 8. That's the shortcut. You just simply put them in the brackets. Helps us when we have a long sum like this, where the sum is not just, oh, that should be a minus, where the sum is not just asking us to factorize. So now we have x minus 5 and x minus 8. They've asked us to simplify. We should have a common factor, and that can help a little bit with the guide number piece, because I knew one of them had to be minus 5, so that helps. We want to simplify this, so it's simply 4 over x minus 8, and there is no further simplifying. We are not able to cancel, and I'm actually going to talk about this one here because I really feel like here people are going to be, now this is wrong, incorrect, and I'm going to be, this is wrong, before you're going, what can I do? So you cannot cancel the 4 and the 8 to get a 2. That is not right, because let me give you an example. 4 over 12 minus 8. Would that be the same as 4 over 12 minus 8? Doing that cancelling. So that would be 1 and that would be 2. So would that give me the same answer? So that would be 4 over 4. And then this will be 1 over 10. Like, they're completely different answers. So you cannot cancel. You cannot do that division unless you have factors. So unless there is multiplication. And this is something that haunts students the whole way up to Leaving Cert higher level. What I would always say is make sure you have brackets before you do any kind of cancelling. Think of cancelling as division, and division requires multiplication. They go hand in hand. So now we have another example, top line, bottom line. Top line is not highest common factor, it's not grouping, it's actually a difference of two squares. So we can get any type of factorization here. X squared minus 16. This can be written as x squared minus and 4 squared. That's x minus 4, x plus 4. And it doesn't matter which bracket comes first. Absolutely fine. Bottom line, quadratic trinomial. I'm going to use my shortcut again. Minus 20. My guide number is minus 20. That means my signs are different. It's going to be minus 5 and a plus 4 because I want the middle one to be minus 1. So that gives me x minus 5 and an x plus 4. This gives me x minus 4, x plus 4. Here, x minus 5, x plus 4. We have an x plus 4 common above and below, and that gives us x minus 4 all over x minus 5. And we cannot simplify any further. It is not possible. Okay, go back to a number example. Put a number in there for x, okay, and you'll see that actually you cannot cancel any further. So I want you to try some of these yourselves. There are 6 questions, majority of them using kind of highest common factor. I've thrown in the last 3 are all quadratic trinomials. Question 6, I put a quadratic trinomial in there where you cannot use the shortcut because it has a 5 in front of it. So just to be aware that you have to do full guide number method on that top line there. So it will be that little bit longer. Be careful, make sure you're only cancelling or dividing when you have factors, i.e. when you have brackets showing multiplication. And we'll correct this at the start of tomorrow's class.